back to Brazil Crypto Report. Today I'm joined by Daniel Rybnik of Bitcoin Argentina and Julian Colombo, Argentina Country Manager at Bitso. We discuss Argentinian President-elect Javier Milei's policy proposals, his intellectual alignment with the Bitcoin community, and what we can realistically expect from his heterodox presidency. Great. So today I'm joined by Daniel Rybnik, who's the co-founder of the nonprofit Bitcoin Argentina, and also Julian Colombo, who is the country manager at Bitso Argentina. So Daniel and Julian, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
Thank you for having me, Aaron. It's very great to be here.
Amazing, amazing. So let's start off with a couple of a quick introduction round, I should say. Daniel, do you want to give us a bit of background on yourself and what is Bitcoin Argentina?
Sure. Okay. I've been introduced to Bitcoin back in 2012. And since then, I had the chance to co-found the NGO Bitcoin Argentina, which is an organization that has the purpose to really make at the time we started with this NGO, many of the exchanges that are now in Argentina didn't exist, including the main exchanges in the world didn't exist. Also, the main exchange at that time was MTGOX, which now does not exist. So the scenario really changed. I'm also a lawyer, and I was always interested in the connection between law and the money, and of course, when all these crypto products started to appear, I was really very fascinated with all the changes that were coming as a result of this revolution.
Amazing, amazing. And Julian, quick introduction from you.
Yeah, thank you, Aaron. So Bitso was founded in 2014 in Mexico, and we started our business in Argentina in 2012, just a month before the pandemic hits. So we are one of the biggest crypto exchanges in Latin America with more than 7 million clients. And I've been working in crypto since 2016. I joined when I was living in Washington, D.C. for a master's program, and discovered that using crypto assets was the fastest and the most and the cheapest way to move money from and to different countries. So happy to be here and happy to try to explain what's happening now here.
Amazing. Oh, well, I was actually living in Washington, D.C. in 2016 as well, and that's when I also found crypto. So wow,
we might have crossed.
But anyway, so just kind of diving in here, we did an episode recently that just published with Sebastian of Rybnik, and we kind of went into a bit more in depth into some of the economic policies of Argentina and like how we've gotten to this point where there's runaway inflation, and it's kind of, you know, with all due respect, it's kind of become the model for how to not manage an economy, I guess. You know, just say that out of love, but you know, it's kind of true. And obviously we're at this point now where, you know, kind of looking at this from the crypto stakeholder perspective, where I think you have there's a lot of people on Twitter and a lot of people, I mean, even just on my normal podcast circuit of podcasts I listen to, there's people pontificating and talking about, like this Milei got elected in Argentina. It's really bullish for Bitcoin. I think market was up like 3% just on the news that he got elected. And it strikes me that there's a lot of reason for optimism here, but there's also a lot of projecting narratives onto things that might not actually be real. And so I'm hoping to get kind of a download from you guys on who is this Milei guy exactly, and you know, what should we be reading into some of these narratives that the Bitcoin crypto community has cast onto him, right? Like he's this kind of, you know, Najib Bukele type guy who's going to be, promoting Bitcoin adoption in Argentina, when it doesn't. It seems like there's a lot more nuance than maybe what the Michael Saylors and the Balajis and some of these other guys are saying on Twitter. So maybe Julian, maybe I'll start with you to just kind of get a brain dump from you on just like how did we get to this point, and what should we be reading into this current situation here?
Sure. Trying to summarize, since the current government took office in December 2019, we suffered through a lot of things. Pandemic, the different wars, a very big draft here was affecting the exports of our biggest commodities. So name it. So we face very big challenges. So as a result, combined with some difficulties on the cabinet of the president on handling these kind of problems, we are facing now the situation that is like kind of a worldwide record, which over 150% of inflation rate year to date, with poverty that it's almost 60%. So kind of it's a very difficult situation here with a national currency, which is our peso, which lost almost like 70% of its value in just 10 months. So we faced the last presidential campaign in this context, with the particularity that one of the candidates was the Minister of Finance of this government. So was the guy responsible of handling this kind of indexes, right? Which is kind of weird, or trying to explain to people from other countries. So how a person or how a politician that is in charge of handling this kind of problems that the policies are not giving the results they expected, reach a position to be competitive in a presidential race. On the other hand, we have an outsider whose first steps in politics was only 2 years ago, when he took office as a national congressman after a very brief campaign in which he presented himself as the only and true liberal option that Argentina had. And it was a person that appeared at the TV stages as a columnist on financial issues, on macro perspectives, in different like very popular TV shows. So this was kind of a weird contest, because we are very used to establishment politicians. So here you have to do the cursus honorum, like to reach the presidential seat, in which you have to be a governor or a congressman or a mayor or whatever. No, and we are facing now like kind of a new situation in which a person with no previous experience on the public sector is now facing the challenge of leading the country. And maybe like that was because of the policies that were not giving result, or because of a certain feeling of tiredness on the Argentinian population on being governed by the same people as like a couple of decades ago. So we can discuss it, but this is the point we are now. So we are facing a president very different than the ones we have had in the past, with no experience on the public sector, which is being surrounded by people, but by a combination of people which had roles on the 90s, combined with other younger people which had also no previous experience on the public sector. But a lot of people are very enthusiastic on this possibility of being governed by a different group of people, right?
Great. And then Daniel, is there anything you want to add to that? And then also, I'd love to hear from your vantage point as kind of an OG Bitcoiner. How do you see Milei's sort of worldview and values kind of aligning with the Bitcoiner worldview? And what do we know about Milei's stance toward Bitcoin? We know he's made a few public statements, but what do we really know about how he views Bitcoin and maybe crypto more generally?
Gained so much adoption in crypto because of the failure of the government to really have like a strong currency. And at the same time, this led the whole situation to have like a person like the one described by Julian, an outsider with a different proposal on how to face the problems in Argentina, which may lead to an economic situation that will maybe have the opposite situation to which gave rise to the reason why people adopted cryptocurrencies in Argentina. So Javier Milei is a person that is really in love with the I would say libertarian ideas, because if we say liberal, maybe liberal is a word that is differently used in the US. So he's a libertarian anarcho-capitalist, and he really felt in love. He has some books that wrote about this topic. He's also a follower of von Mises, Rothbard, Hayek, all the Austrian economist authors. And well, as you know, everybody that falls in love with an idea, at some point, if you have to implement this idea, this may give rise to different interpretations on how this idea should be implemented. So where we are now is in the previous step to what is the implementation of these ideas in the hands of Javier Milei, which, well, I will be completely honest. I'm very enthusiastic about what is happening, because I'm also in love with these ideas. I've been following von Mises since I was in high school. It's a long time ago. So I am also part of the pre-libertarian party that was created like 13 years ago in Argentina. All the people that I knew from this pre-libertarian party were now part of the Bitcoin community. The founders of all the early adopters were like Franco Amati, Gonzalo Gluson. All these people were in the pre-libertarian party, and I met all them again in the Bitcoin community. So of course, there are a lot of people in the Bitcoin community who are really very enthusiastic about the idea of having a libertarian president, and we are expecting the next days to have him take a bench and really make all these policies public.
Yeah, there's a couple of interesting things you mentioned there that I want to kind of double click on maybe. So the first is that I mean, he is. I mean, I think this was the area that I found most surprising about him, was that this guy is very intelligent, very well read. Like when you see, I mean, my first exposure to him was like you kind of see the memes on Twitter, and he's kind of this like outlandish guy. He's a showman, right? He knows how to get people's attention. He's obviously very good at using. You know, he has his I was just watching before we started recording. I was watching that campaign ad where he's like smashing this model of the central bank with like a Thor hammer. You know, it's like, all right, that's pretty good, right? Like gets people's attention, right? But just the extent that like how well read he is, particularly on Austrian school economics, right? And I've learned over the years that like, okay, anytime you find somebody who identifies as like an Austrian school economics person, that like if you're going to debate that person, like you really need to know your stuff, because these people are not like, this isn't the stuff they teach you in school, right? This is the stuff you have to learn on your own, and like you got to really dive into, right? So it's like this guy is not just some sort of like clown that just like happened to get elected. Like this guy is like a highly intelligent, like very like well read, you know, understands this stuff inside and out type of person. And then the other interesting point you mentioned at the beginning of your remarks there is that there's almost this weird paradox. I was thinking about this a lot before we started recording. Like, there's almost this paradox where, like, what's the best thing that a government can do to promote like adoption of Bitcoin and crypto? It's like, well, yeah, you could implement laws that are like helpful and make, you know, legalize it and whatever. But in the case of Argentina, it's like, well, the best thing you could do is just print a bunch of money uncontrollably so that people like have to use Bitcoin, right? Right, and that's the biggest sort of inducement of people using Bitcoin and crypto is just runaway inflation, essentially. Maybe not optimal, but it does do the trick. But Julian, just turning back to you here, how do you see? I mean, you're obviously, you know, you're the country manager of one of the largest exchanges in the region. I mean, how do you guys kind of see this election, like, or this new presidency, this new regime impacting like your business? Like, then I also want to touch on maybe a bit more of. I know there's some. I don't understand this super well, but I know that there's been some prohibitions put on banks and fintechs offering crypto, or there's some restrictions at least. And what types of policies can we be expecting out of this administration as it relates to things like this? So maybe Julian, if you want to take that, and then Daniel, if you want to jump back in.
Sure. First, I just want to put a pin on what an amazing industry the crypto world is, in which not only a libertarian future president like Milei is very enthusiastic for the community because of the ideas of the liberty, of the uses of cryptocurrencies as a valid method for settled payments or whatever, but also how different the actual government is, and how this government, because of the inefficiency and the different capital controls, have helped the adoption of cryptocurrency here, as you mentioned, like as a hedge against inflation and devaluation, as a way to settle payments more instantly or faster. So this is amazing, because this is one of the few topics that can bridge over the political divide, and no matter where the politicians come from, every context will foster the adoption of crypto. And for me, that's amazing. Like, this being said, we are very optimistic on the future of the industry here. Not only because these last couple of years, Argentina have seen a very big adoption on the use of cryptocurrency, mainly driven by the use of stablecoins as a replacement of the US dollars that people cannot get legally because of the capital controls. But also because there is a lot of sectors that are currently very controlled or are strictly prohibited to operate with cryptocurrencies, that we'll be able to, or that we supposed, or that we are pretty certain that they will be open to, like you mentioned, like banks or fintechs or brokers offering exposure to crypto prices to their clients, maybe in the form of ETF or futures or whatever, maybe not crypto itself. But also, there's a lot of restrictions on the use of cryptocurrencies for settle foreign commerce or the transnational commerce. So, for example, you cannot channel imports or export using crypto now, because there is a strictly prohibition in which you have to use the decentralized market. Or you cannot settle international payment for salaries or whatever, because all of these kind of transnational payments have to go through the official channel. And we suppose, or we are very optimistic, that the new government will open or will lift these restrictions, so both the institutional and the retail customers will be able to use crypto for this new set of stuff that were not able to do now. And this combined with the ideas, as Daniel was mentioning, of the liberty of being able to settle local contracts or payments in whatever the currency the people want to use, being the Argentinian peso, the dollar, the euro, the yen, or the Bitcoin, or the Ether, or the stablecoins, or whatever. So being able to settle private contracts using cryptocurrencies open for us, for the crypto community, a lot of new experiences that we have been able to use, but in a very specific points, like in the real estate market or in the cars market. So these are markets in which we are used to settle payments or to settle contracts using bags full of print money, in which you have to literally carry bricks of bills which no value, and then you will be able to do it legally just with a click or just with a transfer via your cell phone. So that, for me, it's a very big improvement that we will face since the beginning of next year.
Amazing. And then Daniel, would love to get your thoughts on any kind of pragmatic policy implications that we can expect to see from the Milei administration here. I guess both your perspective as a Bitcoiner, but then also from the Bitcoin Argentina perspective. I know you guys have been active in proposing some different laws and legal frameworks and things of that nature. So I'd love to get your thoughts on that. And then another question would be, Milei's talked a lot about dollarizing the economy. And just I guess this would be a question for me, both of you, would be what would be the implications of this for crypto specifically? Like, would there be as much demand for USDT if dollars were more just readily available, like regular dollars? Would this maybe increase demand for USDT because people realize it's just an easier way to get dollars, and there doesn't necessarily have to be like a black market around it anymore. Anyway, would love, Daniel, why don't you start with you, and then Julian, if you want to jump back in.
Sure. Okay, well, for Bitcoin, it's much easier to compete in a context where peso is weak and there are many capital controls, and all the situation that Julian described is the best scenario for Bitcoin to develop, because you don't have other option to really do transactions. Of course, the markets get smaller because the economy is shrunk. If we have a scenario where the economy will start to really grow, we will have other layers of the reasons to adopt Bitcoin that are much, granular, in the sense that you will need to look at the qualities of Bitcoin in a higher to a higher extent, that because if you have like a freedom of currencies, you are competing with the dollar, you're competing with the franc, we are competing with the euro, so that you will have to find a reason why to use crypto that in the current context is much easier, because you don't have the ability to use other medium of payment. So I think in a libertarian context, where the people have the ability to choose whatever currencies they want, there are of course many reasons why we want to use crypto, and among these reasons, of course, you can find that the global regulations on for example, anti-money laundering, the SWIFT system of payments, all these controls and systems are really making the machine be very slow and expensive, so that also you will have to operate within for example, today, Thanksgiving, you don't have banks, you don't have the markets. In the crypto, this doesn't happen. You have the ability to work 24/7, and you don't have to go through all these AML controls, except if you go through a centralized exchange. But you don't need to go through a centralized exchange if you want to operate completely in native wallets of the particular crypto you are operating. So it's much more open. You have privacy. So there are many reasons why you will still be wanting to operate with crypto in a free market. And on top of all the reasons that I mentioned, that of course there are more reasons, is that it is a fantasy that the fiat currencies, including the most strong, like the dollar, euro, are not devaluating. Every year, the purchase power of all these currencies is lower. It's easy to find out, if you travel, or if you look at all the charts, you have inflation in all these countries. And this is something that in Bitcoin, for example, is not happening. So the reasons to still adopt crypto are very, very sound.
Julian, do you want to jump in there? Anything to add?
No, on top of that, I think Argentina has been an amazing source of very talented people working on the crypto industry. So when Vitalik Buterin was here, or during the LaBitConf expos, or even at at exports or events all over the world, there's always a very strong presence of Argentinian developers. So we have been used to use our creativity because of the restrictions and all of the turmoils we face during our whole lives, in which, as Daniel mentioned, so the abilities to use crypto and the advantage to use crypto here, it's amazing. So I think that the combination between the proper environment to foster this kind of creativity plus the talent the Argentinian developers already have can only increase the contribution we can make to the crypto industry.
And then, kind of going back to Milei here and his upcoming presidency, and at least my read on him is that he has said some positive things about Bitcoin, but he's really just more of a libertarian who has lots of overlap with the Bitcoin worldview. And I don't know how necessarily pro Bitcoin he necessarily is, but there's a lot of shared values there. And I guess what would be, maybe Daniel, is a question for you, but say if, okay, obviously whenever somebody takes the presidency role, there's all of a sudden all these people coming out of the woodwork who are trying to lobby them and influence them and throw ideas at them and whatever. And I would assume that because he shares so many values with people in the Bitcoin community, he will probably listen to those people, or at least take their ideas seriously. But what would be kind of under a Milei presidency, what would be the ideal scenario for the ideal positive scenario for Bitcoin that might realistically come to pass? What would be your kind of your dream scenario?
Okay, when the pie is small, maybe you have a large market share of crypto versus all the other payment or store currency systems. I think in an ideal world, the pie would be much larger, and maybe the market share for crypto will be smaller, but still will be larger than the current in absolute terms. Maybe not in relative terms, because if people will be able to trade freely with other currencies like dollar, euro, mostly dollar, they will maybe not find a reason to use, for example, Tether, because Tether is is backed by dollars. So why would you use Tether if you can have dollars? Of course, you can have some advantages, but usually you would prefer to have dollars if you so that you don't have another intermediary, which is Tether, right? The Tether company that holds the dollars on behalf of the token holders. So the ideal scenario for Argentina, if we have a libertarian government, is I would say not to focus on crypto regulation, instead focusing on what are the barriers and the obstacles to the general economy, so that to repeal all these obstacles and barriers, and by doing so, you will not need to do anything particular for crypto, because if you eliminate the barriers for capital controls, if you eliminate the barriers, for example, for using your bank accounts, if you don't tax the payments on when you use your credit card when you travel abroad, if you eliminate all this, you will not have to do anything particular for crypto, because crypto is one more thing in the whole universe. And in a libertarian government, you don't need to have regulations for each particular thing. You just have the broad legislation that is applicable to the economy and to people, and you know what are the rules. You know that you have a contract, you have to you cannot breach this contract because you will face all the potential problems by breaching contracts, and that's it. So in the freedom environment, you don't need that someone really has to take particular care of crypto. It takes care by the contracts and by the people that use this, and by the judicial system that is accepting that the law is based on the contracts and that respects what voluntarily people do on their interactions.
And then on that broader point of which I like, I agree with, in that, the ideal scenario is one where you're just kind of like, you're creating the best overall scenario for the broader economy, providing a maximum amount of freedom and liberty, and just letting kind of the market, adopt crypto or not adopt crypto as it best sees fit. But just kind of pragmatically here, maybe Julian, we'll turn to you with this one, and then Dan, you can chime in. What are going to be the biggest barriers to Milei adopting some of these things that he's promised, right? Like obviously the Peronist kind of political machine here is quite strong. They've been in power for a very long time. There's a lot of, they've got a lot of power still in a lot of the institutions across the government. And we've just seen, just globally, in the last decade or so, with, we'll call it like, kind of the populist insurrection type of elections, with like whether it's Brexit or Trump or Bolsonaro, right? The political establishment will sort of find ways to, throw sand in the gears and, get these populist people sort of out, right? And so I'm just kind of wondering, what do you think are going to be the biggest hurdles to, because he's proposing some pretty grand stuff, right? I mean, he's campaigning, walking around with like a chainsaw, like, talking about all the things he's going to cut, all the spending he's going to cut, right? And it's like, okay, it's good optics, right? But in practice, it's a lot more difficult to do these things. So, Julian, maybe you want to take that one, and then over to Daniel.
Sure. You just name it, no? Yeah, you have, I don't know, a lot of context on what's or how's living under similar experiences, like Trump in the US or Bolsonaro in Brazil, and it's very different, the things you can say during a campaign trail than the things you can actually do when in government. There's a lot, in the particular case of this country, there's a lot of red tape all over the federal government. For example, like, just to point out a few cases, there are more than 700,000 federal employees on the country. So firing like 50% of them, as like Milei or some of his supporters say during the campaign, will be basically impossible, because those employments are warranted by law. Like most of them, you have very strong unions here. You have a culture of not dealing like with the employment of people. I'm not saying it cannot be done. I'm saying it will be very difficult to do. So the chainsaw or the sticky notes on the different ministries, like being like thrown over, will be very difficult to do when taking office. Or, for example, some of the things he said was to burn down the central bank and have no central bank. Like, from my point of view, that's gonna be impossible. Maybe you can get rid of the monetary policy and like you can print no money, no local money, and then like focus on the dollarization or whatever the project may be. But the central bank address a lot of other functions, like supervising the banking system, like addressing the reports that the banks and fintechs have to present. And I see very difficult like to preserve the integrity of the users' funds in banks and fintechs with no central bank, because of the surveillance role it has. So these kind of different examples are the ones in that I don't think like 100% of the things that Milei or his supporters say during the campaign will be able to do or to fulfill as were said. Nonetheless, I think we are going to see some radical changes, or some like very important changes, mainly during the first like 2 or 3 months of government. So, for example, he promised and he's insisting he will privatize a lot of the national owned or the government owned companies, like the airlines, our petrol and gas company, or the water and seawind company. So this is kind of the like very like traditional liberal stuff I think he will do. And it will be very interesting to see how much of the libertarian stuff that Daniel was mentioning and that Milei centered most of his campaign of, he will be able to do with, don't remember, or please do remember, with no congressional support. He has less than 10% of both deputies and senators from his political party. He's working on different political coalitions with other political parties, but he won't have the majority on neither of the congressional chambers, which will make the things more difficult because there's a lot of things that you have to pass or they have to be passed by the Congress. So we will face a very difficult environment, like to fulfill all his campaign promises. So let's see.
Daniel, anything you want to add to that?
I think, yes, there are many areas that are very visible. The areas that Julian mentioned are very visible. There is an area that is not as visible, and at the same time is the main problem that needs to be solved, which is the sterilization policy that was being implemented by the government since maybe the days of including before Macri was in charge. This comes from a former president of the central bank. His name was Fábrega. After that was Banoli, then Sturzenegger. All the central bank policies were based on lending money to the treasurer. And this created a big ball that is called the LELIQs, which is bonds that are issued by the government that are 3 times the monetary base of the country in Argentina. And this, how this issue will be solved is really very important and does not need any congressional involvement. So this is something that will be really the turning point of how all the new government will face. And depending on how this will be solved, there will be, of course, some kind of a mega devaluation of the peso, because if, for example, the government decides to pay all these bonds to the banks, they will have pesos in the market that are probably going to generate price increases, and also maybe the dollar will go up as well. This is something that we don't know, because maybe already in the price of the dollar is included this LELIQs effect. So, in the market it's very difficult, because you create different effects by doing one thing, that you create maybe confidence, and at the same time you have more pesos in the market. So we never know what will be the final effect. But this is really the main aspect, because all the public spending is really peanuts compared to how much is the government spending on the interest on these bonds every month. So this is a real challenge for the next government. And if they solve this, I think most of the rest of the problems will be really small, because the prices and the salaries are denominated in pesos, and by doing depending on how you solve this problem of the LELIQs, you will have a lot of pesos in the market or not. If you instead of paying these LELIQs in pesos, you for example do like a swap of these bonds to dollar denominated bonds, this will create a different scenario, because all the people that have the money in the banks, all this money is the collateral is all these LELIQs that the banks have, and the banks are not lending money to people because they are lending money to the government. So the effect of how we will solve this issue is really the most important thing for the next government, and it's really a big opportunity if they use it properly to solve. Maybe this will be like a bomb that will explode in one time, but at the same time, this bomb will create the conditions for much more sound policies and a change in the way that will be much easier if it is done correctly.
Amazing. Moving, I just want to wrap up here in a couple minutes. So just final kind of quick round of questions here. And I really want to focus on just kind of the optics of this whole situation, right? At the very least, Milei he hasn't even taken his office yet, but he has definitely won kind of the hearts and minds of the global Bitcoin crypto world, rightfully or not. But he's we have kind of Bitcoin luminaries on Twitter like Michael Saylor and Balaji, congratulating him as the next Bitcoin president and all these kind of things. And maybe that's probably premature to be saying that, but it's at least it's a helpful narrative at least. So I guess the question for both of you would be, I feel like all of this has been very good for at least bringing more attention to what's going on in Argentina and bringing more attention to the actual crypto sort of use cases that are happening in Argentina that we're seeing. I mean, I think even Peter McCormick, the What Bitcoin Did guy, was in Argentina a few months ago. He did a big documentary kind of on inflation, how people are using Tether, all this kind of stuff. It feels like there's just a lot more attention being paid to the region just generally by the broader crypto community. And one of the reasons I've started this platform, my Brazil Crypto Report platform, is just because I felt like there wasn't enough English language really content or just attention being paid to this part of the world. So I would love to get some of your thoughts on how does this, I mean, at the very least, if nothing else happens, at least it's bringing a lot of like very positive attention from the Bitcoin crypto world to like this part of the world. And Julian, maybe we'll start with you, but we'd just love to kind of get your reflections on, what does this kind of mean for like crypto and Bitcoin adoption in the region more broadly, just given this influx of attention?
Yeah, first, I agree with you in believing that it's maybe premature to call him a Bitcoin president. So, like, he has had like some interviews in which he spoke about like the role or the philosophy or how he coincides or concurs with the philosophy of Bitcoin because of the freedom, the liberty, or whatever. So, but I still don't know if it's correct to call him a Bitcoin president. But this being said, for me, the best narrative we can use is that we have been living in a country in which the use of crypto, because of the macro problems and the capital controls, have been a real solution for daily lives of a lot of people. The use of stable coins, the use of investments in Bitcoin, you name it. So there's a lot of things. And then we can continue that narrative now, in which seeing how a pro or a more liberal government or a more pro liberty of contracts government can foster the adoption we already have. So I really would like for these people that have traveled, like Peter McCormack or like Michael Saylor or like the lot of very influential crypto people who have put an eye on Argentina because of the use of the widely spread use of crypto, to keep surveilling the country to see how, I'm pretty confident, how the crypto adoption and the use of crypto will keep increasing, no matter how big or small are the capital controls or the macro problems, or no matter who's in government. And I think we have a population which is increasingly fond of trying new stuff in order like to live more efficiently, in a cheaper way, in a faster way. So I really believe that we will still have to see the most interesting years for the crypto use here.
Daniel, do you want to comment on that?
Okay. I think we still have to see what is going to be implemented. Javier Milei is in love with an idea, as many of us, and how this idea is brought to reality. We don't know yet. Maybe he creates the best conditions, and he follows all the books, all the Austrian economics books, and we have a horizon of liberty and people increasing the welfare. And I don't know if people will need or not crypto at that point. I really don't care if they will need crypto by then. To the extent they can. The important thing is that they can really choose what they want to do. This is something that runs in a parallel way, that in the Austrian model is not a model, it's a concept. So that what people do is really not really what we are focusing, because we are really open to what people want to do. This is like just an architecture, and people move around with whatever they want to move. Of course, if they don't affect or violate other people's. So I love crypto. I love Bitcoin. I have been saving in crypto for a long time. I have a lot of clients. You mentioned Sebastian. I helped Sebastian launching Bitpago, which is the previous company to Ripio. So I'm a fan of this. And at the same time, I think we should not be thinking that we are the center of the universe. People do what they want. And if they choose or not Bitcoin, is their decision. We don't have to choose Bitcoin, do them choose whatever. It's their option.
No, it's very well said. Yeah, I think that is sort of the core ethos, right? It's the freedom, right? It's the freedom to choose, and let the market decide, let the individual citizen decide, and we'll ultimately see the best outcomes in that capacity, right? All right, well, we're going to wrap it up here, but really want to thank both of you for coming on the show. I'll turn it back to each of you for any quick final thoughts, anything else you wanted to say, and then how can folks get in touch if they want to learn more? Julian, you want to go first, and then over to Daniel?
No, first of all, thank you, and thanks for giving us space, because I think we are on a breaking point in which we'll have to see, or we will see very interesting things during the next couple of months. So keep tuned to what's happening here. There's a lot of media. There's a lot of people on Twitter. You can follow me at Julian_Colombo on Twitter, or you can follow Bitso. So we'll see, and it will be very interesting for me to see if President Milei, as promised, will get rid of the monetary policy, which is one of the main prerogatives that every government has. So I think it will be very interesting to see how he deals with that.
Okay, I think it is very important for me to separate the idea from the implementation. I see this both in many areas, including the crypto industry. A lot of people fell in love with the idea of decentralization, security, the trilemma, and scalability, so that they started to love Bitcoin. And then there were other crypto developments in the market. And if you really are in love with this idea, you should be able to separate the idea from the implementation, so that be open to what the market is really developing. Like, for example, I don't want to make any advertising, but there are new developments. I don't know whether you've heard about the Ghost DAG that is being developed by the Caspa community. And this is creating a revolution into the crypto market. and based on really the Nakamoto consensus. And I think this is something to be focused. And I see that a lot of people that, like, for example, the Bitcoin maximalists are really cannot really separate the idea from the implementation. And Bitcoin is an implementation of an idea. And I think we should be open to what is going to be happening next. And well, of course, I'm very excited about what's going on in Argentina in the next few days. And well, again, my name is Daniel Rybnik. I'm in Twitter. I'm in Instagram. I'm in Facebook. It's easy to find me. I would be happy to be in contact with all of you. Thank you. And it's a pleasure to be in this show, and congratulations, Aaron.
Thank you. Yeah, and thank you so much, Daniel, Julian, for being here, and really appreciate your insights. Very valuable. I think there's just like so much to this situation that is interesting, and kind of you really want to take advantage of the fact that the world's kind of, at least the crypto world, is focused on Argentina right now. So I really appreciate you guys coming on to share your insights and help us just to better understand this. So appreciate you both, and thanks everyone for listening.